Hey everybody, today we're gonna do a few things. I want to talk a little bit about game management. I want to talk about loading scenes so you can go from like a start menu to the play scene, something like that. And I wanted to then, after having those two concepts in place, show how you do something like pause the game so that Jumpy Cube won't stop or will stop jumping when you hit the pause button, because as it stands, if I were to play and tap, he jumps. If I were to hit options, he also jumps in the background as I tap. And you probably don't want that. So I'll talk a little bit about how to manage that. So to get started, I already know that we're going to need a couple scenes to show this off. I'm going to pretend that what scene is this? Lab 2. Let's pretend that this particular lab is my main scene. And then I need a start scene. So SL means sub-level. This isn't really a sub-level. I'm going to call it just main start screen. Start screen. Boom. We've got our start screen. Save. And in here, I don't really need a light or anything. It shouldn't, because it's going to just be a user interface. But if you have a 3D model or whatever, feel free to keep the light. I need to go to my scenes, and let's talk about game management. I'll put it in the gameplay folder because that makes sense. So I'm going to create a C# script and call it Game Manager. So Game Manager is going to be used across all sections of the game, and he'll know about everything. He'll know who to talk to, he'll know how to get the game started, how to finish it, what scenes should be loaded at different times, all those types of things. And the way he'll know that is because we scripted it. So, what are some things that get you started for success or game management? Well, first, there needs to be one and only one reference to a game manager in general. And to get there, you need to use what's called a singleton kind of format. So singleton just means no other game managers exist. This is the one to talk to across all scenes. So to do that, you do, I'm just double checking. I think it's a static. I just don't want to be wrong after typing it. Ah, yes. So I could say the type is going to be public because anybody can hear it. Static because there should only be one of them. Game, I'll call it just instance. Excuse me, game manager is the type. Instance is the name. And it starts out as null because it hasn't been assigned yet. On awake, when the game first starts, we sort out if a game manager already exists. If it does, then destroy myself and let that guy drive. If it doesn't, then now I'm the game manager. So you say if instance is still null when this object comes into existence, then instance equals this. Hey, that's me. So now I am the instance. Let me just double check. I believe I say don't destroy on load, right? That is correct. Yeah. Okay. So instance is equal to this. It's me. And don't destroy on load this. Or I could say this dot. Yeah, I'll say this. Don't destroy unload this. So now, or the whole game object. That's probably safer. So now, when we have the scene load to go from start scene to play scene, whatever we want to call those scenes, normally you lose all of your stuff when going from one scene to another. But if you define one as being don't destroy unload, then it remains, even when you load to another scene during runtime, not during editor. So to prove that, we could do something like just on awake scene manager, scene, ooh, I think it's called scene manager, right? Using scene, using, ooh. I thought it was using scene manager, but I could be wrong. It changes sometimes. And then I have to figure out what they've changed it to. Unity.scene management. Unity.scene. Rid of this one so I get my autocomplete back. Using Unity.scene. Unity engine. Let's try that. .scene. So, oh yes, it is Unity engine. Okay, yeah. Unity engine.scene management so I can load to the next scene. And I'm just going to do it on awake, but later we don't want to do it on awake. I'm just adding it here for a test, just to show that the game manager doesn't go away when I go to the next scene. So, scene manager dot load scene. And what scene do I want to load? I could use either a number or I could use a name. So I prefer number. By going to the, I'll let it compile, and then I go to the build settings, and the number is actually when it appears here. So I'm going to remove this scene, and then I'm going to go to the scene manager here, and I want the start screen to be scene 0, and then I want the lab 2 to be scene 1. That's the one I want to go to. So, okay. And it says right here, 0 and 1. So those are my indexes. That way I don't need to remember the names of the scenes. I just know, okay, 0 is my main start screen, and then 1 is my play screen. That's cool. So I want to load scene 1. And that's just as a test. And even, yeah, I'll do it like that. That's fine. And so basically, right when I hit play, I'm going to add an empty here. I'm going to call it Game Manager. I'm going to add a Game Manager script to it. There he is. And now when I press play, you'll notice that it goes right from start screen to scene 1, which was lab 2, whatever. Lab 2. And you'll notice there's a Don't Destroy Unload section. And it has the game manager in it. So that's how you have an object that can persist from one segment to the other. And then that object can manage a lot of the inter-scene concepts like game data and phases. So like, what phase of the game am I currently in? How should I manage these things? Notice my not super concerned about it. I just see it in the reflection. And it's getting me a bit. So let's make this a little nicer. So, boom. How do you manage scenes? Well, you could say I'm in phase 0, which would be my start screen, and 1, which would be my play screen. But instead of integers, which would be the 0, 1, 2, I like using fancier integers. We call them enumerators. And the nice thing about enumerators is that they can have names, and they still translate to 0 or 1 or 2, but you know exactly what they are because you've typed out a name for them. So I say public enum game phases, so it's a public variable, anybody can talk to it. It's an enumerator, so it's a list of names that are assigned to integers, so 0, 1, 2, 0 is start, 1 is play, 2 is credits. Game phases, that's just what I'm naming it. I could name it whatever I want. And then you do an open curly bracket and a closed curly bracket, and I can put every game phase I want in here. So for example, I know that I have a start screen, or I'll just call it start phase and play phase. I know that I have those two phases at the moment. And what else? What else would we need? We want to represent those game phases. So I'm going to say public game phases, because it's going to be an instance of that enumerator, current phase. And maybe current game phase just for clarity. and I'll give it a default value of start. Oftentimes, there will be an init phase like this, where you make sure that you have some save data and all that sort of thing before you start the game. Sometimes it could also come in form of the splash screen itself, you know, where you see like the logos all come up. Sometimes you do have something before start phase. So anyway, I will have my current game phase be the start phase. And to go from phase to phase and to deal with when new phases arise, I'll just give myself some scripts here. So I already know I'm going to need a public method that lets me start the next phase. So I'll call it start. Well, because I have a phase called start phase, I'm not going to call it start next phase because that might make it unclear. I'll call it set next phase. And what do I want to put in there? I want to say, okay, what phase do you want to start? Is the question that needs to be answered. So game phases next phase is going to be right in there. And I forgot to add a void. So set next phase is going to, all it really is going to do is change its phase stuff to current phase, which is this guy up here, equals whatever next phase you wanted. Then, not only will I want to be able to change my phase, but I need to have controls for when I start and when I end a phase. So I'll have public void do or initialize phase behavior. And I'll say current phase behavior because I'm not going to pass along anything. I'm just going to use whatever the current phase is. And I'll have public void end current phase behavior. And for readability, I think initialize is a little wordy. So I'm just going to say start current phase behavior and assume that we understand that start is not the same as start phase. And for both of these, not only do I need to have them there, I need to run them. So when I set my next phase, I need to end my previous phase. So end current phase behavior. And then I need to, I transition my phase, so start current game phase. And once I've started that next phase, then now I can start current phase behavior. So I've ended the last one, then I transition, and then I start the next one. So that's kind of the overall flow control for a game manager. He can go from one thing to the next. So start current phase behavior. We'll need to go through each type of phase that it has and figure out what it needs to do. I could do if my current phase equals start, then do this, otherwise do this. But a faster way to do that is called a switch statement. So I'll switch on my current phase. And a switch statement is like an if statement, an if else, where you say like if this, then do this, otherwise do this, otherwise do this. Except it's just faster. It uses cases. So instead of saying if, you just use the word case after the word switch. It looks like this. You hit that little eyeball. I'll show what I did again. Switch current game phase. Open close curly. It'll give me a little eyeball, and I say add missing cases. Now it just automatically covers. This is like an if statement for every case I could possibly have, for every phase I could ever have. So, boom. Now, when I end my start phase, I want to go into my play phase. Arguably, you would say maybe you don't want to do that because maybe the start screen can lead to credits and can lead to whatever. I'll deal with that down the line. Right now, we're just getting from the start screen to the end screen, or to the play screen. So the end current phase behavior, we'll do that scene manager dot load 1. I'm thinking if I want it to be here, or if I want it to be at the start of the next phase. I think I want it to be at the end of the start phase. You could argue either way. I'll put it here. That'll give us safety. I've decided. Okay, so when play phase starts, it will load scene 1. So some things we could do now is create little UI that lets us test it out. Now that we have all that code in there, you'll notice that I have a little drop down here. So that's a lot nicer looking than having like a 0 and a 1 to know which phase I'm in. So that's why we use enumerators typically instead of 0s and 1s and stuff. Why my Unity is running this slow, I have no idea. But let's give ourselves a little UI. I'm gonna make myself a canvas. I'll call this start screen canvas. Start screen canvas will be a prefab, just like my main UI. So these are two different UIs. One is for the play scene, and the other is for the start scene. I don't need a component yet, but I will start editing this. I want to have an image. I'll go to my scene view so that I can see what I'm doing. I want to have maybe a background image, walking down the street, background image. Okay, I'm going to hold Alt and Shift when I click this bottom right corner so that it just automatically stretches out. Otherwise, I'd have to zero these out after hitting it. I ain't got time for that. I'm going to look up a repeating texture. There's actually a website, I believe it's called Subtle Textures, Subtle Patterns. Subtle Patterns, is that it? Subtle Patterns. And Subtle Patterns is actually a nice little website where if you need just basic patterns, you can just pick one and be like, cool, I'll use that. So I don't know, fruit, I feel like a fruit theme. No fruit in the entire library. Gosh, what if I search like apple? Pineapple cut. Banana. Oh, we're in town. We are bananas today. So I'm gonna download it. It has downloaded it to my folder here. I want this banana. I'll unzip it. Extract two bananas. Did it do it? There it is. And now I'll plop it in here. I believe Subtle Patterns is free to use as long as you credit it. I'll put it in my UI art folder. This is a trick of the trade. I can say, make it a UI. I talked a little bit about this before. So where is 3D and UI? Boom, apply. I'll put it on here just to look at it. Boom. Looking a little stretchy. Why is that? It's because it's not repeating. So instead of clamping, it's wrapping. We could make a perfectly sized image, but that would only look perfect in one particular scenario, and then you need a different image for each one, or you'd oversize it so that it's always there. I prefer just saying, hey, repeat. And filter mode point so you're not blurry. I want to say apply, and that should make it less stretchy unless I'm crazy. Only POT textures can be compressed to an ETF1 format. Okay, so let's go back to bilinear. And I believe now I can say tiled, and now it'll tile that image in the back. No stretchies. How many pixels per unit do I want? I believe the higher number I go, the bigger the bananas will be. Oh, other way around, the smaller the bananas will be. So I want some beefy nanners. So let's do, as 0.3 feels good, right? And now no matter what screen size I'm looking at, go back to the game scene. If I was, let me change my build mode to iOS platform. And it's going to take a bit. It's got to convert the textures and all that to things that are Apple friendly in the library side of things. So now no matter what resolution I'm at, you know, there's always a background, and it always takes up the full screen. Now 16:9 portrait doesn't specify a resolution. It's just a ratio. So it's going to look a little beefier there. But as you see, no matter what device I'm on, I always have a nice background. Let me go back. I'm looking for iPhone 8, but it looks like they don't even have it. I have an iPhone 8, so it'd be nice if I could plop it in, but I guess not. I'll just use this one. Okay, so now we've got that banana background. So we know when we get from the banana background to something else, then we are no longer on the start scene. So I'll call it BG start screen. So the background of the start screen. And now I'll make an empty object. And I'll call it FG start screen, which just means I'm the foreground. I'll make sure that it takes up the full amount of the screen. Boom. And now that we have that, I can right click, create. I'm thinking I'll create text. Create text. And I want that text to be my like title screen text. So it's probably going to be big and beefy. So I'll make it take up maybe from it'll probably be center based or like top center based. So let's make it anchors from 0.1 to 0.9 on the X. So like from here to here. And then from the Y, I'll go like 0.6 to 0.8. I'll zero this stuff out, and then we should get a better feel for how much is taken up. That feels like a good spot for a logo. Now you could make an image whatever you want taken up here. I just have text. I want that text to be centered horizontally and vertically. I'm going to say best fit, which I believe sets it to the best fit along that line. And I'll say banana game. I got my banana game. I'll set it to bold because I'm a bold banana game. If you ever want your text to get bigger than that, you're like, oh, but I already checked off best fit wherever I check that off. It's because it has a min to max. So I could say if I said the min max was 100, then, you know, fit to 100. So now we've got banana game. Banana game needs a button here that transitions from this scene to the next. I'll call this logo text. Right click UI button. Just to show you how how I would size things properly, I'll do it differently. So I'll right click, create an empty game object in FG start screen. And I'll call it button region. And I'll put it at the bottom of the section. So from 0 to 1 along the X, and from like from 0 to 2 on the X, or on the Y, so that it's taking up the bottom section of the screen. I'll then 0 all these guys out, boom, boom. Just so you can see it, I'm gonna add an image to it by adding component like this, and I'm gonna type image. Now you can see it just to get an appreciation for it. And so now I want to make sure that I have buttons there and that I can click in it no matter what my resolution of the screen is. Let me just check this message. Make sure it's not important. Not important. So now that we're here, a button region should have a horizontal or vertical layout group depending on what you want to do. I was thinking about having 2 buttons on the bottom corners or something like that. So I have a horizontal layout group and I want to have 2 buttons in it, so I'm just going to right click button. That's button 1 and this is button 2. How do I want them to be aligned? I want them to be aligned in middle center. Boom, you see how that's already getting us somewhere. How do I want their size to be held? I want it to be, so just to show you what's going on now, no matter what size I am, those buttons are always positioned exactly where we want them to be, but they're not necessarily always sized how we want them to be. So to get around that issue, so like I'm turning my phone to the side, whatever, I'll set control child size height and width. And then I'll say how much spacing or padding do I want. Well, spacing is going to be between the two, so 10, 20, make that feel okay. And then padding. Padding I want, let's do 10, 10, 10, 10. Now I have some breathing room across all my sides, and then now I successfully have, I'm going to make it free aspect just so it's easier to appreciate no matter what resolution my game is. I'm always going to have 2 buttons, and it'll always look okay. Boom. 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 So now I'm going to go inside of there. I'm going to click on those text elements, and I'm going to say best fit. Oh. Instead of from 20 to 40, I'll do like with the other one, 20 to 80. I think the other one I said 100, but we'll do 20 to 80. I could color those buttons whatever I want, but I'm going to make the one on the left called options. The one on the right called start. And keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a horizontal layout group. If I removed that horizontal layout group and made it a vertical one instead, the same stuff applies. You just check these off. Size your height and your width. Let me just check out here. There it is. I just have to leave the game and come back. And I can set my spacing back to 20 and my padding back to 10. And now you have a vertical layout group instead of a horizontal one. I probably want it to be closer to the, like not right on the bottom. So instead of 0.6 to instead of 0 to 0.2, I might make it 0.1 to 0.3, and then 0 these stuff out, boom, boom. And to make sure that it never, okay, will never overlap because this will always be at 0.6. And this one will never go past 0.3 on the Y. So they'll never touch. So now I have my my buttons set up. I could even go further. I could say 0.1 to 0.9 for that as well for the X values. And then 0 these out. And then, I don't know, whatever you want to do, play around with it. I don't need this image anymore, so I'll get rid of it. And now I've got my buttons for my option and my start, and it works in order of their appearance. So if I drag one to the top, they switch around. So it's easy to work with. I'm going to call it btn_options for this one. And the other one I'm going to call btn_start. When the start button is hit, I actually don't know if this feature exists yet, so let's see what happens. I'm gonna remove this here because I can't get to it from the prefab. I need to be in the scene because the game manager doesn't exist with the start canvas. So I'm gonna go to my start screen, the button region, the start button, gonna add one here in the scene so that I can drag game manager into it. And does game manager give me access to the end current phase behavior? I see. I do not have. Yeah, I don't have access to that particular method because it doesn't have like a basic type. It doesn't know what this enumerator is over here. So I can't just connect into it because it's not a simple data type that we're passing along. So I'm going to give ourselves a little method. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take away the public rights of these methods because only the game manager should be able to run those. It's a little scary if somebody else can. Just double check it. Oh, of course I get the email here too. Okay, so not only do we have the start phase and the end phase behaviors for each phase, we're also going to have public void trigger play phase start, or I could say trigger start game pressed, something like that. I'll do on start game pressed just because it's my own style, but you can call it whatever you want. This is just right when the start button is hit. What should it do? We want to run this start next phase, and we want to run game phases dot play phase. Boom. The only other thing I should add is on awake. If we are the official game manager, not only should we not destroy and load and all that stuff, but we should also start current phase behavior just to make sure that if the start phase, when it starts here, if it needed to like load data and like get microtransactions, like whatever it needs to do, you can do it here because when the game manager starts, he just starts the phase if he is the one and only Singleton, one and only instance of game manager. So now that we've gotten here, I believe I can just hit this game manager is referenced. And you can say game manager on start game pressed. So that is what we would do if we want to have. So we went to the next scene and we're able to trigger this right away. I'm doing an iPhone X resolution, which means my options button is quite small. So let's go to, I don't know. That's better. So maybe you'd have an option that takes you back to the screen here. You'll notice I still have my game manager there. So we can give ourselves an additional method in our script called public void on play quit pressed. So I'm going to add myself a little quit button, and it'll just start next phase, or set next phase start. So that's how we return to the start menu. Boom. Let's go to my other prefab. Menu controller. I'm going to change that to being called play menu controller for nicety. play menu controller, let's go to our scene view so we can watch it. In our options panel, I'll add myself some buttons. So let's go to that FG panel, which is this blue background here. There's a button close, and I turned off the input field because I don't need it. I'll delete it while I'm here. I'll create empty, and I'll say button region. Boom. Button region is, you guessed it, a vertical layout group. It'll have a series of buttons we want to hit. And this in particular, I'm going to be just adding, let's make it take up, let's make it go from 0.1-ish to 0.9-ish, maybe even less, 0.2 to 0.8. And then on the Y, I'll make it take from 0.2 to 0.8, 7, 8. Yeah, that feels good. 0.2 to 0.8. And then I'll zero it out. Boom. And now I can add some buttons to it. The button region should force the width and the height. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know how many buttons I'll have, but it'll look good. And let's give ourselves some padding. I'll say 10 each. With a spacing of 20 between them. I guess really it's 40 between 40 from one to the next in pixels, and then 10 for the rest. It's all good. We got these buttons, and the last one is going to be quit. Name your buttons, by the way. I just don't have names for them now because I don't know what they do. I'm just an example. Button quit. And this is when a menu controller comes in handy. So we have this menu controller. Menu controller didn't do anything before, but now, because the game manager doesn't exist, and I said, oh, you can't really add play behaviors to a script because it doesn't have a reference to a prefab, because it doesn't have a reference to like what is the game manager. Now, since the parent script has a game controller on it, the script here, menu controller, excuse me, I can say public void on play quit pressed. Boom. If game manager dot instance, so I'm looking for my game manager, and for clarity I can say if it's not equal to null, then that means I can use it. I can say game manager dot instance dot quit. I called it quit, right? On play quit pressed. Make sure these are called the same thing. So now the menu controller gets the message, and then he reports it to the game manager. Boom. So we've got our buttons. The bottom button, I'll make it say quit just so I know what it is. Quit. Best fit. That's a nice beefy quit. Nice beefy quit. It can always be bold. And if you want it to be an icon, of course, make it an icon, and then just check off the don't stretch the texture checkbox. I forget the name of it. And yeah. Oh, and the button, when it's clicked, now I don't need to go into the scene. I can work right from here. I can drag the play controller, boom, the menu controller, and I can say on play quit pressed. And then the menu controller for the play menu can handle finding whatever it is we need and loading into the previous scene. So that would only work in this scenario if we had a game manager in all of our scenes. So if I wanted to test it right from Lab 2 mobile UI, is that it? If I wanted to test it from here, oh, and I did forget to turn off my options. Yeah. Get out of here. Now it's just the play menu with the little button. Okay. So if I wanted to test it here with my player, the cube, and all that, then I need to make sure, and it looks like I remembered, to have a game manager in here, but it doesn't have his game manager script on it. And I thought that I had a prefab for it. Do I? I don't yet. So maybe I want to make a prefab for my game manager. Not super necessary yet. So in this scene, the game manager would be play phase. And you'll notice if I were to go back to my scene of my start, when I transition from one scene to the next, even though I have a game manager here and a game manager in my other scene, there will only be one when I go to the next scene. And that's because that awake method we added to game manager says, are there any other game managers? If there are, then I shouldn't exist. And actually, I think we should verify that. Because now that I think about it, I think maybe I didn't add the destroy myself part. So if the instance is null, then I am the game manager. Else, destroy myself. I shouldn't exist. Because there already is a game manager, he's already on the case, I'm unneeded. I'll hit play. We're on our start screen. We see one don't destroy unload game manager, and we know there's another one in the next scene. I'm going to hit start. Boom. I've gone into the next scene, and lo and behold, there's still only one game manager. I'm going to hit quit. Boom. Did I fat finger something? Did I add the method we wanted? Let's find out. On, boom. Button options. Options panel, FG panel, button region, button quit. On, play, quit, pressed. Oh, that should have done something. Oh, you know why it doesn't work? I think I know why. Let's go to menu controller. He says game manager, on quit pressed, go to definition, start the phase of start phase, but I believe we don't have this. We didn't tell it when you start, load your own scene. And because this could get double called by this here, I am going to say if scene manager dot active get active scene dot index is not equal to 0. So if I'm not already in the start screen, then tell it to load the scene. The reason I'm adding this is because when I start the game in the start scene on awake, I say start my current phase behavior. So I don't want to reload the main menu just because of that code. So I want to run a quick check. Hey, am I already in the scene? If I am, then don't bother loading the start screen again. Not mandatory, but good. Good to have. In case your start screen is like really intensive for some reason. So now let's press play. This is coming up only because I'm not connected to my phone. You want to maintain as few or no errors if possible. Start. Cool. We only have one game manager and he's in play phase. Options. Quit. Still only have one game manager and he is in start phase. So the only other thing I might want to add is when I'm in my start phase and I hit, interesting, it doesn't loop back. Why would that be? Oh, I know why. I know why. Okay, so this is because the start screen canvas loses his reference to the game manager, because the game manager, when we load from one place and come back, is then destroyed. So I'm going to go to my start screen canvas and add that same menu controller. We might have different menu controllers in the end, but now that it's here, let me apply that. Now that it's here, button options can instead go to the start screen here, boom, menu controller, and we'll add a method. It's going to look just like on play quit pressed, except it's going to be called on start game pressed or whatever. Let me just see what we called it here. On start game pressed, exactly. On start game pressed, and it's going to run the game manager's version of that method. And that way we don't need to like have a separate reference to an object that could get destroyed. That's why it's good to work within the prefab. Wasn't even thinking about that until I did the test. That's why we test, so that we find these things. So button start is going to run the menu controller. So start screen canvas has a menu controller on it. I dragged that into the on click. I should see menu controller on start game pressed. Boom. So now that we're here, let's go back to the scene and make sure the start doesn't now have like two things on it. Yeah, let's see if I can revert the values on this thing. Revert. Now if I go to the start button, it should say start screen. And you'll notice that start screen is not in bold. It's in bold either if it's different or if it's referencing something outside of it that it can't save. So that's why that's in bold. But I want it to be that start screen, so as you saw before that, and then the menu controller and on start game pressed. But that was already in the prefab. I'm just gonna hit revert. Nice. Okay, so now when I go to the game and back, I can start the game again. So let's press play, start, quit, start. Hey, we've got it. All right. So the only thing I might want to add after that is making sure that the button can't do anything when I've pressed. And the way I might go about doing that is on options pressed, which is here. I might try to, let's go to menu controller. I'll say public bool trigger pause, and it'll be either paused or not. Oh, excuse me, public void trigger pause, and it'll either be true or not. Menu controller then reports up to game manager if we'd like. I'll say public void on paused here. Public void on unpaused as well. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and you can pause anytime. You can pause during the game screen. I don't know when else you would pause. Maybe you can pause the credits. But when you pause, you'd want to set time.scale to 0. So now time is normally 1. Now we're setting it to 0. If you set it to 0.5, then it's going in slow motion. You can do that. That's always cool, but not what we need now. And when we're unpaused, we go back to 1. Since I multiply all of my character movement by time.delta time, when I set scale to 0 of the time scale, then that means nobody moves anymore. So let's go back to menu controller. I'll do an if my instance exists, then if is paused, do one thing, else do another thing. if I am paused, then game manager dot instance dot paused. Boom. Else game manager dot instance dot unpaused. Boom. And now everything should just work. I just need to tie in the functionality in my menu controller in the game scene. So let's go back to scenes. And lab 2. I'll save whatever I did if I did anything. Okay. Let's go to my menu controller prefab. Let's go to, not quit, it's going to be close, is going to unpause. So not only should I open and close panels, but I should also tell my menu controller on trigger unpause. That's so trigger pause with an unchecked thing means I'm not paused. And the play panel, when I hit the options, I want it to do the opposite. I'm gonna add a new thing there. Go away. Drag in play controller, menu controller, trigger pause true. So one trigger pause is true, the other trigger pause is false. And now we can do a little test. I'll go to my start screen. I'll press play. Banana game. Start. Okay, cool. And now I'll hit boom. And you'll notice he stopped animating, no matter what I do. The only catch is I want to hit quit. The only catch. Oh, interesting. The timescale doesn't get reset to 1. That's my bad. But I was going to say the only catch is if I hit pause and then unpause, he gets those triggers still in his animation because I'm not really managing it as best as I could. But that's okay. So the only other thing I'd add to make sure that we don't like get in a bad time loop is when the start phase starts, when any phase starts, I want to make sure that my time scale, I'll just run on unpaused after each start thing, just to make sure that my time scale is good. Anyway, I hope this was a useful lecture for you, a useful lab. I know that it's more code intensive, but it's to show you how to load scenes from one thing to the next, show you how to manage your state so that you can say, okay, now I'm in the credits, now I'm in the start screen, showing you how to go from different scenes using those phases, and then controlling the behaviors of your game based on that. So I set my time scale to 0 when I pause so that my characters will stop moving. And it's that easy. Hope that was educational. Always reach out to me if you have questions, and I'll be, of course, providing all of this code and maybe even the project if I can zip it up easily for your use. All right, have a good one.